Maddie, welcome to the podcast. You are the channel Beer in Beautiful Places on YouTube, Instagram, all over social media. It is so great to have you here. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. Before we start anything, just because it's kind of part of your theme, I thought I would bring a beer along too. So I'll crack my beer, and I know you've already cracked yours. What are you
Yeah,
drinking? What are you
I'm
drinking today?
drinking a beer from Mexico. I hadn't seen it in the States before. It's called Cerveza Indio. It's really good. It tastes like a typical Mexican lager, very light, smooth, real good.
Okay, I think your beer knowledge is going to dwarf mine, but I've got a Kona Island Lager, the longboard.
Nice.
It is always good. Do you have a favorite? I know you mentioned it a little bit. Do you have a favorite kind of beer?
Not, well, favorite kind, yes, definitely. Fruity sours are amazing. They taste like candy. Like, I'd drink it all day if I could. That being said, though, I like to expand my horizons. Sometimes I'm like, I need to stop drinking beer that tastes like candy and start drinking beer that tastes like beer. So I'm trying to find a balance, but I do love fruited sours a whole lot.
Fair enough. I like it. I find that if I have a sour though, I can only drink I could drink one or two, and then I got to move on to something else.
Too sweet for you?
I guess maybe so. They're just yeah, too much like candy. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, now before we get too far down into this here, I want to make sure everybody has got a context for your channel and what you're doing. Now, I know you as the through your documentary and your kind of van life through all 48 states and having a beer, specifically trying to have a beer in every state while you participate on all your adventures. I guess, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Maddie, and I run Beer in Beautiful Places, a travel vlog about exploring nature all over our world and trying the local beer along the way.
Now, what was the motivation to strike out and have a beer in every state and yeah, travel through the states?
Well, I'd been thinking about living in a van for a long time, and in 2020, it just seemed like now was the time. With everything changing, I was like, okay, van life seems like a good thing to do right now. You can't really travel internationally. Let's live in a van. But then I was like, I just don't want to just um, go somewhere kind of willy nilly and just wherever the wind takes me. I was like, I want a mission. Um, like when I backpacked through Europe, I was trying to go to as many countries as possible. So I was like, okay, how can I make this experience more of a mission instead of just everyday life? Which, not saying anything against people who live in vans and just want to live, but for me, I wanted to um, just see what I could do, have a goal to go for.
Gotcha. You got to have more of an objective. I can understand that. And that's a really cool objective, and I feel like a marketing dream as well as like a YouTube, right? Just really syncs up well. So now, before you started, did your YouTube channel exist before the 48 states goal? Just as you were traveling around Europe?
No, not in Europe, but I started in the fall of 2020, and I couldn't really go many places. I was living with my parents, and I didn't own a car before my van. So in the beginning, it was just going on hikes around my hometown. So not this most super interesting locations to go to, but I learned a lot about my video style and what I find interesting, and then making videos that I would find interesting, and hopefully other people do too.
Oh, that's interesting. And then do I have the timeline right? In between that, you left for Europe, but were not doing the videos and then came back?
Um, no, Europe came first, and
Gotcha.
then pandemic, and then let's make a YouTube channel.
Fair enough. I guess now that we're on the far side of the pandemic, it all kind of blurs together in my mind.
Very true. Yep.
Now, okay, the traditional van life, or maybe the more traditional van lifers that I'm used to now are using the Mercedes Sprinter van, or at least that really like box style um vehicle where you have enough room to, I think really the key is that you can stand up or at least kind of sit fully up. But now you went with a bit more stealth option, low profile. What were the motivations for going with an actual, it's a Toyota minivan, correct?
Yep. And the motivation was just money. Simple. It would cost less to buy. Initially, the build would be less simple with less space. And also, I learned along the way that insurance was going to be a way bigger cost than I was expecting, especially because this was my first vehicle. I hadn't ever been insured before. So it was super, super big when I started. Plus, they ask you, did you convert your vehicle at all? And I did. So they jacked up the prices. Now I've kind of learned that don't ask or don't give them information unless you're specifically asked to, not advocating like insurance fraud or anything, but just the less details, the better.
Those are words to live by. As I've grown older, I like the statement of if you're not going to like the answer, don't ask the question. Okay, jumping back in after that short technical break there. So now on this van build, did you have it planned out beforehand, that you needed, like how you were going to convert it, or how did you think about that?
Well, that was just a big daydream saga throughout that whole year, because I was like, okay, if I had a normal like Sprinter van, I had a layout planned out. And then I thought, what if I lived in a SUV, and I had a layout dreamed up for that. When I finally got the van, I did procrastinate for a long time because it was just such a huge project ahead of me, and I was kind of just like, I don't feel like going outside to measure and stuff. It's too cold. But once I finally got the measurements, I was like, how can I have storage space, have a comfortable bed, and just maximize the space that I do have?
Gotcha. And so now you've also got, I've kind of picked up, it sounds like a pretty extensive background in the outdoors. Did you grow up hiking, camping, kayaking, all of these things?
Not kayaking, but definitely my parents would take me on day hikes, camping at campgrounds, which definitely wasn't really as um the first time I went backpacking, I was kind of like, oh, I know all this stuff already. And then I found out it was very different than going to a campground. But yeah, I was really lucky to grow up in the outdoors.
When was your first, or when was an early backpacking trip?
In college,
Okay.
I signed up with a program that my university put on where we went backpacking on the AT for 4 days, and I kind of felt like, oh yeah, I know everything. Not well. I'm sure it wasn't to that level, but I felt very confident. But then the first time I put a backpack on, I remember picturing somebody was behind me pulling down on it to play a prank. And I was like, it's not really this heavy. But lo and behold, it was that heavy.
Right. The weight that you carry makes a dramatic difference. And I'm definitely excited to get into that too. Because now that you've done some major through hikes, I'm sure you've had the opportunity to dial in and find the right gear, or perhaps leave the wrong gear at home. Um, but now, when you struck out on this statewide journey, it sounds like backpacking was an element of it, but perhaps not the main focus. I noticed that, kind of in watching your documentary, you ticked off a significant amount of the national parks. Were you trying to go to all of them, or just have a list of the best ones to go to?
Not really. My goal was to see the most beautiful, and it's kind of an objective thing, but see something that's really, really beautiful that the people that live in that state would be like, oh, yeah, good choice. Like, I'm from Kentucky, and like the Red River Gorge is one of my favorite places. So I went there, and I was hoping that, like, when I went to Indiana, I went to Shades and Turkey Run state parks, and I would hope people from Indiana would be like, oh, yeah, good choice on that. So that's just how I went. And then when I was more, when I would come up to states that had national parks like Acadia and Shenandoah and Bryce Canyon, I was like, oh, while I'm there, that's when I can go to that national park I've been thinking about for a few years.
That's really cool. And that's something that I would point out, that I think I learned a lot from watching your videos. I guess I'm, born and raised in California, have lived in Colorado and Washington. And so if you notice, I keep staying in these like Western states, which kind of have these, obviously amazing wilderness areas, national parks, but I was not as familiar with some of the ones kind of in the Northeast, or in the areas that you went. Now, when you started your journey, it looks like it was cut up into specific legs, and you started in the Northeast, correct?
Mhm.
Now, was that drawn out on purpose, where you wanted to do so many states and then kind of come back home, or what was your thought process there?
It was mostly about how the weather would be when I was there. Like, I've always heard a lot about New England fall, so I wanted my first fall to be in New England. And then when it was summer, I went north. Winter was probably the hardest time of all to figure out, because Florida, I was okay, but even going across like Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona were all pretty cold. And that lasted like from January, well, maybe February to March. So that was kind of chilly, but I wanted to be making progress.
Well, Chile, no kidding. It seemed like, especially in the early episodes, you were picking these like rather cold environments. I don't know. I don't do particularly. I will definitely volunteer. I don't do particularly well in the cold. Do you enjoy it? Is that something that you look for in the outdoors, or was that just a happenstance?
No, not really. Just a happenstance. Definitely
Okay.
that was, especially when it was, I don't know, when I was in West Virginia and stuff, it was before Thanksgiving and it was frosty, and I was like, oh my gosh, how did I let this happen? But I did run into a few delays from the route that I planned, so that was just like, take it as it comes, deal with things as they come up. Not ideal.
Okay. Okay. So that was going to be a question of mine with your van build. At night, do you have a heat source inside the van, or is it just cold?
No, I don't have a heat source because with propane being a little like questionable, I was like, okay, let's see if I can live without it. And my second fall and winter, I was like, man, I really should start looking into getting those, but I just never ended up getting one. Um, just putting it off over and over again. And yes, just kept putting it off. I did have a like 30-degree sleeping bag though. So I was warm when I was laying down. It was just like sitting up before I went to bed when I was cold.
That must have made it tough to get up in the morning.
Yeah. Although it was really cool because I learned if I took my window covers off, it would be the greenhouse effect and the inside of my van would get pretty warm pretty fast if the sun was out.
Okay. Now to that comment, did you find that when you kind of reflect back on your travels, I guess what I hear when people tell me about their van life story is that the reality is that it's very much a mix of many nights, or if not most nights, you're really camping in parking lots or areas that are maybe less than dramatically beautiful, and that those like national parks or those amazing campsites it's a lot of work to be able to actually camp in those.
Yeah. And it really depends what state you're in too, because out west, obviously it's more BLM land and national forests. That being said, though, there are places to camp for free in the east too, which I wasn't really expecting, but thanks to iOverlander, those are out there.
Oh, interesting. Is that, I don't know, is that what is that, iOverlander?
Oh,
Is that
yeah,
a,
I'm sorry. iOverlander, it's an app, and basically you can check in to a free campsite, and then when you're looking for a campsite, you can go to this map and see, oh, what's around me. There's paid campsites, free, or where it's basically a parking lot. So, yeah, it's very handy.
gotcha. Okay, really cool. Now, okay, you started your journey and did a short segment or a tiny segment, and then you made your way, it looked like, across out to California. And so I would assume that somebody would be, if they were doing the 48 states, would just do kind of like one continuous journey,
Mhm.
that would make more sense. But what was the reasoning for maybe chopping it up a little bit?
Oh, just because the camp where I knew people, they were the first people that summer. All camps were short on staff, and it just happened to be that camp that reached out to me that was like, hey, we really need help. Also, we can pay pretty good. So I really did not want to drive all the way across the country, but at the end of the day, I needed the money, and that's what it had to be. I really wish it wasn't all the way out there, but that's just the way it ended up.
But that's a really cool. It's really cool that you struck out on this journey. I guess I'm used to the couple friends that I know who have kind of converted a van and are going that route. They're either part-time van lifers or maybe pandemic van lifers, and the reality is that kind of their setup is a much more work remote, and so they're not tied to a specific location. But it sounds like your background is working as a camp counselor at different camps. So do you do that over the summer and then van life kind of the rest of the year, or how do you work that out?
Well, when I was in college, I was a counselor. The next summers, I worked my way up in the ranks. And before the pandemic, I had what I thought was a job that I would stay in for a long time, but no camps could really operate that year. So I lost that job. And then during the pandemic, people were talking more about wages and like, you shouldn't take a job if it really negatively impacts your mental health. And I was like, oh, yeah, it is really hard to be working basically 24/7 every single summer for weeks and weeks on end. So maybe I should look into something different. And that's where I started to live in a van. That I really wasn't planning to work at that camp job. While I had a van, it just came up.
Gotcha. On the table. Okay, that's really cool. And then after that, at what point did you? And you'll know the exact name, but I tried to take a note. It's I would call it the Lake Superior through hike,
Different
the backpacking
Superior
trip,
hiking trail.
Superior hiking trail. That's really cool. And then was that done before or after your summer in California?
That was before, because that
Okay.
was June, and I headed out there for July and August.
Gotcha. So, as part of your journey around the U.S., it seems like you were sprinkling in these various through hikes. What was the motivation to do the Superior Trail?
Well, it was my first solo through hike, and I looked up a list of what are the best hikes for solo hikers, and there were some that were 50 miles. There was one that was 200 or 2,000 miles, and I was like, I wanted something a few hundred miles, and Superior Hiking Trail was just the right amount of length for me. I think what made it best for solo hikers was kind of proximity to towns, maybe not too hard to, you don't have to hitchhike for miles and miles if you don't want to, and having campsites along the trail where you were supposed to sleep instead of just camping wherever. Those campsites were kind of like, um, you would meet people through them. Sometimes I had the place to myself, but I didn't meet a lot of people because we camped together. And then the JMT, the John Muir Trail, that was just while I was in California. It was something I wanted to do for a long time. I thought I did one through hike during the state road trip. Why not do another? Because they were about a year apart. And I didn't get a permit when I applied initially, but I applied for another permit the week before I wanted to leave, and I got that. So it was just kind of a little more spontaneous than I would have liked. I would have liked to prepare more, but I'll take it when I can.
I had it's not posted yet, but in between the posted videos and you, I've got the co-founder of the company's called CampNab, and they're trying to address the exact issue that you had of in California specifically, but this website works all over. It's where permits are booked up. You can sort of like set an alert on your phone such that when somebody cancels, it opens up and lets you book it.
Nice.
It sounds like you have experienced trying to fight for a California hiking permit, and the JMT is like notorious for that.
Yeah, definitely.
That's interesting because I saw that video clip of right. You had really. It sounds like it was maybe on the back of your mind with the JMT, and then all of a sudden, you get to go, and you kind of like. I've been in those situations before where you maybe feel compelled to go. That being said, it's such an enormous trip. Did you feel? I would assume you felt excited, but perhaps a little bit nervous over the scale of the adventure that maybe came up.
Yeah, definitely. Because the Superior Hiking Trail was 300 miles and the JMT is 211. I was like, it's going to be shorter. It won't be as difficult. But really, the elevation, not even just being high up in the mountains, but there's so much climbing up a mountain pass, climbing down a mountain pass. Just, it seemed like it was never flat. But yeah, it was really challenging. And I was very out of shape too. So I kind of started off on the wrong foot too.
That's interesting though, as a comparison. So it sounds like the Lake Superior through hike was, I don't want to say maybe significantly easier, but a little bit easier given the profile.
I think it was hard in a different way. The big
Okay.
challenge was the heat and the bugs and just kind of the mental challenge of being by myself for 18 days. So it was definitely, it was also hard, but hard in a different way.
Now, it's interesting that you say that by yourself for 18 days. One of the things that I picked up on from your videos is that it almost seems like you meet more people on the through hike as opposed to your van life looks pretty, maybe a bit more isolating, a bit more alone versus it seems like it's a better environment to maybe meet friends or meet new people on the actual trail. Did you find that was the case?
Yeah, definitely on the JMT, I met a lot of people because that trail is so popular. But with the Superior Hiking Trail, especially towards the more northern bits, um, it wasn't really, I didn't run into as many people. And I was actually going, this kind of sounds kind of braggy to say, but I was going faster than a lot of the people I ran into. So it was hard to find someone that kind of matched my pace.
Oh, that's interesting. On the JMT, it seems like you met up with people, and especially towards the end, were hiking, I think, every day with them or most of the days with them.
It was two groups that I kind of fell into very luckily, by the way. Felt really grateful to have met them, but it was also the last couple of days of the trail. So just the way things worked out.
Right on. Now, I guess coming off the Superior Trail, were you like, I think the classic backpacker is like, I've got to change up different things, different tents, different way that you handled your food. Is there something that you felt you handled really well on the trail, and maybe something that you were like, oh, I needed to improve this?
Good question. Man, I know before I did the SHT, I did the Tahoe Rim Trail, and my upgrades between those two was I got a lightweight tent and a lightweight sleeping bag, and that made a huge difference. I think the main thing that I changed for the JMT was I had a solar panel this time, and that was really cool because the trail was very exposed to the sun, so that was really neat. I think kind of my hiking strategy and trying to go fast, trying to get up early kind of changed from my experience on the SHT, because before I was kind of like, there's no need to rush, like take some time to smell the roses, enjoy the experience, and instead of just trying to get through it. But then when I was on the SHT, I kind of discovered that going fast is fun. You feel really accomplished at the end of the day. But that being said, the JMT terrain was so difficult, it was harder to do that. So I think my strategy changed more than my gear.
Gotcha. Now, along those lines of like wanting to go fast, did you have planned out where you were going to camp every night beforehand, or an idea of how many miles you wanted to go?
Nope, just go as far as I can, and when it's getting close to the end of the day, then look at the map on my phone on Gut Hooks, aka Far Out, and then plan from there.
Okay, kind of do it, assess at the end of the day. It's such a common theme, and I think that people perhaps, I know this, because it's a broad podcast, people who have never backpacked or bike packed before, I think are always shocked to find how comfortable, people like yourselves are, about just kind of hiking and not knowing necessarily exactly where you're going to stop. I guess you're confident enough that you can find a campsite at the end of the day.
Yeah. On the Tahoe Rim Trail, which was my first through hike, then that was before I made videos. I had a lot of trouble finding a campsite, and I don't remember what the big change was. Superior Hiking Trail, they had designated campsites, but then on the JMT, I guess I looked more at my app at Far Out to see where other people had mentioned camping, and maybe that was the thing that made the difference for me.
Is that on the Lake Superior Trail? Is the setup that you have to camp in these designated camping areas?
Yep.
It's interesting to hear that. I think a lot of my impression, maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, is that a lot of the more East Coast or, east of the eastern half of the U.S. has their style is that you can only camp in specific areas, versus I guess on the west, what I'm used to and what I grew up with is like there are suggested campsites, but it's also a bit of a you can kind of camp wherever you can find an area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that a good description of the two halves of the U.S.? Or I guess that's a little bit of a nuance that I found.
Well, I know the SHT is like that and the AT is like that, but I can't think of any other trails. That being said, I haven't done a whole lot of long distance trails, so maybe.
Totally, maybe. Now, you mentioned you mentioned it here, and I know you alluded to it in your documentary, the Tahoe Rim Trail. It sounds like that trip was an earlier trip, and there were some like I don't know funky dynamics going on or interesting dynamics on. Were you there with one other person, or like what was going on? I guess.
Yeah, I was there with one other person that we've known each other our whole lives. So it's just kind of easier to take out your frustrations with someone when you're sure, like, they won't get mad and leave you or anything. So we were kind of butting heads. This person, like, kind of before the trail, we had both agreed to, like, take it easy and not push ourselves too hard. And then on the trail, they were like, let's try to go fast. And I was like, no, I really don't feel like that would be enjoyable. So that was kind of, there were just disagreements on our style on the trail. And I mean, like, fair enough, that happens. No bad blood or anything towards them. I was just like, I think I would be more motivated to go if I was by myself. And I did find out that when I went solo, I ended up hiking more and taking less breaks because I wasn't saying to another person, hey, can we stop? And they might say yes or no. I was just thinking to myself, do I want to stop? And most of the time I was like, no, keep going. Like, you're fine.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of interesting dynamics. I'm always interested in talking about the dynamics of doing a backpacking trip or just doing a hard activity with somebody else, right? Because when you're going solo, you could very much choose your own pace, through hard parts or through sections, and push it if you're feeling good, pull it back. But once you throw other people into the mix, it sounds like it, very much changes the dynamic a little bit.
Definitely.
I have a theory, and I'd love to hear your take on this, that actually the hardest dynamic to hike with is two people. If you're with a larger group, you can kind of like, if you're doing well, or if you're not doing well, you can kind of like maybe turn inward, and the attention isn't on you, where the other two people or the rest of the people in the group can talk. And if you want to be social, you can be social. Or if you're solo, you can just kind of deal with it all by yourself. But I don't know. Have you went through that same process, or would you relate to that at all?
Well, I don't think I've ever done a big hike with, well, I guess the people I met along the JMT. So yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that, because when you're with a group, if you're not feeling it, you can be like, you guys go ahead, I'll meet you later, or I'll hike ahead and I'll wait for you all further up the trail. When you're with two people, it's kind of like, why are you leaving me? Are you mad or something like that? So yeah, I would agree with that.
Fair enough. I guess I'm going to be on that like advocate train for hiking alone or hiking with many people.
Yeah.
Now, along those lines, watching your documentary, it just seemed like you encountered so many obstacles as you went through the U.S. And maybe that's because I got it in a short burst. The documentary is an hour versus like your main catalog is, I'm sure, hours and hours of content. But to my mind, you reacted so positively to all these obstacles and hurdles. Do you find that you have that sort of like mentality that like overcoming, or what is your thought process when you encounter, I know your car had multiple mechanical problems and that sort of thing?
Uh-huh. Maybe, I don't know, because it definitely seemed like a really big deal at the time. But when I wrote the script for my documentary, I was writing it months after the fact or so. So maybe when it was months after, I saw it as more of this happened, here's how I handled it. But in the moment, it always seemed like a big deal. It was a very uh, hot, it was a trip that was full of highs and lows.
Well, it definitely seems like a roller coaster. How did you cope with the ups and downs?
Just take it one day at a time and really uh, letting myself feel any way that I wanted to feel. I think that's kind of a perk to being alone is if you need to be sad about something or mad about something, then you're not affecting the vibes with another person. You can just kind of feel what you need to feel, process it, and move on.
Now, did you have like throughout your trip, because it sounded like too you broke it up into different segments. Was that also to maybe like take yourself out of it for a little while to get a little bit of a rest or a break from it?
It was mostly just because I wanted to visit home every so often. I wanted to be back home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then in May, people I knew were getting married. So I came back for that. And it kind of just worked looking at the map. Kentucky is kind of in the middle. It could be more to one side, but that's just kind of how it worked out with the seasons and um, with the shape of the states, you really have to snake through them. There's not like a direct circle or anything. So I was pretty lucky that I just happened to live sort of in the middle of the country.
The middle enough, right? Okay, that's really cool. Now, along those lines, and I'm going to bring up the topic of money just because you feature it in the documentary, which is really interesting to see. This was done on really a shoestring budget, is what I would say. And one of the interesting things is that you mentioned several times that you were doing DoorDash in these locations. Did you feel like you got to experience the community or like at least familiarize yourself with the town better as a result of doing doing DoorDash?
Yeah, definitely. It was so interesting to see, like, okay, what restaurants are popular and what um am I delivering to like very nice homes or am I delivering to um places that maybe aren't so nice? And it opened my eyes to how much like people's lives differ, even though we all live in the same country. So many people come from every walk of life, and it was really interesting.
That's really cool. I guess I had a similar experience. I went to college in New York and was a bike messenger on the side. And I wanted to be like, I wanted to move to New York and be the classic bike messenger. And I felt like I had the opportunity to explore the city in a way that very few people do because of like having that part-time job. So I can very much like relate to wanting to do that and then to like giving you a unique perspective. Um, now, Now, were you finding that was it your goal when you struck out to use social media to fund your journey or just to document your journey?
Sure. Definitely, I wanted to document it. I always had the goal of one day having YouTube as my main career and focus with my time. So I guess I really had no idea when I would get monetized and be able to fund myself. So I was trying hard the whole time, and I was just very, very lucky that very kind people found my videos and were interested in them, and just lucky the way it worked out.
Well, one of the early successes that you alluded to was your van tour video, and I guess that must have really like primed the pump to enable you to build off of that success.
Definitely. Before, I felt like my videos would. I was lucky if I got 100 people to watch them, but then after the van tour, I noticed that YouTube was showing them, giving more people the option to watch them. So that really encouraged me a whole lot, and I'm just really lucky that had happened.
Now, at this point, how aggressive are you with brand deals? And the reason I say this is because given your handle, Beer in Beautiful Places, I would think that craft breweries all over the nation would be lining up to have you offer beer, camp at their like parking lot. I don't know. How's that going?
Well, during the road trip, especially in Florida, from Florida all the way to Colorado, I would say. So, like the bottom half of the country, I would reach out to people, and it was like a shot in the dark whether they would take me up on it, but I would be like, this is what I'm doing. Would you be interested in exchanging a 6-pack of your beer for promotion on my channel? And so sometimes people were into it, sometimes they just never answered. But that was really cool. But I stopped doing that because they would need to know, like, when was I going to get there, and timing it out. I was like, I would rather just go to a grocery store and spend $12 on beer rather than have to do the logistics of figuring this out. Now, with my upcoming Appalachian Trail through hike, hopefully, I mean, if I don't get an injury or something crazy happens where I can't finish it. But I've been trying to reach out to beer brands that are known along the AT, but it seems like, from my perspective, it seems like a lot of breweries have social media presences, but they aren't really working with influencers, quote unquote. I don't really like to call myself an influencer because I feel like, I'm an influencer, but
Do you have everybody hates that name. Do you have a preferred do you have a preferred way to say it?
Not really. I'm a girl on the internet that has friends that finds the adventures interesting enough to watch. Or a YouTubeist.
Okay. I always like content creator. I don't know, or creator. I feel like that's a bit more generous. Influencer, I know, carries a stigma to it. Now let's talk through your filming process. It seems like early on you were primarily using your phone. Is that still the case?
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
Even though I've learned so much about how to make it as high quality looking as possible while filming on your phone. You know, I'm using tripods and really planning out how to set up a shot. I'm using microphones to make the audio quality a little better, lighting, anything I can like that. So technically, I am still using my phone, and that's kind of a strategy I've been using because when I do the Appalachian Trail, I don't want to carry anything heavy. So I'm like, what if I just got really used to filming on my iPhone the best videos as possible, and that way I wouldn't have to carry weight.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a really good strategy for like minimizing the weight. But I would definitely call out. I've seen your videos with the mic, and I'm assuming that's a huge advantage in the outdoors, just given like the wind and the external noises. That's got to increase the quality dramatically.
Yep. I hope so. I hope people notice. For me, like the first time I was trying out microphones, I was like, I don't really see the difference. But hopefully it makes a difference in the grand scheme of things.
Absolutely. And then and now I took the note down because I've experienced a similar thing, but I don't remember exactly where you were on the trail. But at one point, I believe you lost some of your data. Is that correct?
Um,
I
I don't
think
know. Probably. Do you remember where I was at all?
I think the phone, you were having trouble with your phone, and there was like there were a couple unsaved projects.
In the
Um
Grand Canyon, maybe?
that might be it. Okay. I know how devastating that is. I came back from a trip to Ecuador and I lost maybe the second half of my footage, and it's just so heartbreaking to have that. And I know it sounds like you've experienced similar have had similar problems, but it sounds like maybe now or have a bit of a better system in place.
Not really. I don't know. Well, I guess I figured a little more out about the high cloud system. I feel like I still don't understand 100%, but I'm trying. No problems recently anyway, so maybe I got to figure it out enough for now.
Nice. And now are you editing on your phone as well, or do you transfer it to a computer?
No, right now I'm still editing on my phone. That's another strategic thing that I'm trying to keep going for the AT. Maybe afterwards I'll switch to editing on a computer. But for now, when I see something I like in a video and I'm like, I think I want to try to recreate that, usually I can do it on my phone. Right now, at least at this point in my videography career, I haven't run into too much that I can't do on my phone that I could on a computer.
Interesting. I like that you just make it like you go for like this low profile. It's super convenient. I guess I'm personally like so tied to my computer, but maybe would be better if I went more streamlined, low profile, if you will.
Well, when I
Uh,
started making videos, I only had my phone. I didn't have a computer, I didn't have an iPad, so I was just like, okay, what can I do with what I have? And even though I've been able to pick up little things along the way, I'm in the habit of it, and I probably ought to learn a new way of doing things eventually, but for right now, I don't feel that limited. So it's working for now anyway.
Right on. Now let's talk a little bit about the moment you showed it on your documentary when you finished the 48 states and finally went to the end point. That must have been such an awesome feeling, and you must have had such a great feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah, definitely. I was kind of thinking it's not like the end of a through hike when you're really proud of your body. So I was like, don't give yourself too much credit here. But it was a really cool feeling to be like, I've seen 48 states, and now I really have witnessed so much diversity within our own country, diversity within people, and also in landscapes too. Desert and hills and plains and forests. We really have so much, and I feel lucky that I got to see it.
Do you find that, well, it seems like you're a really open person to begin with, but I'm curious that after going through that experience, and you cited that as well, seeing the range of people and the maybe a range of ideas across the country, that you walked away with maybe more of a sense of compassion, more of a sense of openness for the country as a whole.
Yeah. Um, there are some times when I hear something that happens in the news and I'm really like, how can this happen? Like, is there a way that we're in a big period of division right now? And sometimes I think, is there a way we can come together when we're so opposed. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what that would look like, but I really hope that we do work it out, because we have so much land given, maybe not acquired by the most ethical means. But yeah, we're just, I always think if our country did split up, then, to be selfish, I guess, then I couldn't go to places I really like. You know what I mean?
I hear you. I see where you're going down with that remark. It's interesting too. I guess I'm reflecting on my own. I had the chance to do a similar road trip to yours. I was just working remote and driving around doing kind of the Airbnb hopping, so kind of like the classic, that from that classic perspective. And like you, I think I was struck by, especially as somebody who predominantly lives in cities, LA, New York, Seattle, a little bit of San Francisco, is that just how vast the country is. I think that's really cool that there's so many open roads, and that these small and medium sized towns are really like quaint and have a really like homey feel to it. Did you find that that you wanted to stay longer at some of these surprise towns along the way, or what was your thought process?
Well, no, I'm sure there was a lot along the way that I wish I could have stayed longer, but now I can't really think of any examples. I know that South Carolina was one of my favorites, and the weather was really nice because it was winter when I went, and it was just so nice to be out of the cold. But let's see, Utah I really love, Arizona I really loved. Really all of them. I'm like, even the ones I went to where it wasn't one of my favorite adventures, I was like, I'm sure there's something that could be among my top adventures in this state. I just went to the place that wasn't perfectly suited for me, and maybe the weather wasn't great that day, and there was just a whole lot of variable factors.
What was one of your lower points, or do you have a low point that really is in your head?
Yeah, probably my worst memory from the trip was in Washington, not being sure what was going on with my tire. And then it was a run flat tire, so it was supposed to be designed so that you could take it to a mechanic while it was leaking air. And I was too far away to a mechanic, and it was just a very, not only did my tire blow up, and that was scary in itself, but then I had to spend hours on the phone trying to find the cheapest tow, and no one would come get me because it was the night and I was on the Olympic Peninsula. And it was just really feeling like I don't have anyone to help me here with me. Because it was a run flat tire, the dealership I bought it from convinced me there's no need for a spare tire, and that was kind of like, oh, I'll get this van because then I can have more space because I won't have the spare tire. But so I couldn't even change the tire, So that was a hard time.
Well, you definitely overcame it, and I think that's right around the time, right, that you got the JMT news. So it kind of balanced out, or am I not remembering it correctly?
Well, not really. It wasn't. I guess it was around the same time. But first, I had a horrible experience in Washington. I had already done my nature and beer, so I went down to Oregon to visit my brother. I got sick while I was there. And it's always kind of hard being in someone else's space. You don't really want to impede, but at the same time, I was really trying to take some time off from the road because that was just not a great experience. And it was really hard to be like, okay, I'm going back on the road. But eventually, when I did, that was about the time I was planning to apply anyway, because the
Hmm.
summer was, it was getting later and later in the summer. And I thought, I guess now is the time to. And really, I would have preferred more time to kind of process, train physically, prepare my gear more. But that's just the way it worked out. And so I kind of looked at it as some people go on through hikes to kind of find something within themselves or come to terms with stuff. And I noticed, especially, that once I got back to my van, it was kind of like I was coming back to my van after hiking the JMT, also called Numapoyo, and instead of going back to my van from the Washington incident.
Gotcha. Like, so kind of I almost want to say like cleansing, or like a path forward, I guess it sounds like.
Yeah, a
And
restart.
then a restart. I love that. And then what would be one of the highlights, or do you have a single highlight that stands out?
No, there's way too many. They're so
Too
good.
many.
Every corner of the US was so unique and so exciting and interesting, and I just loved it all.
Fantastic. Too many to count, right?
And
Okay. And then so now looking forward to kind of your future projects and ambitions. I know you've got it sounds like you've got the AT through hike coming up in the not too distant future. Is that something like it seemed like it seemed like you were thinking through in one of your videos, thinking through what do you do just after the 48 states? Was it difficult to decide on a path to move forward?
well, I really wanted my whole, I don't even know where to begin. I guess I've always had it in the back of my mind for the past couple of years to hike the Appalachian Trail. When I did the Superior Hiking Trail, it was kind of like testing the waters. Do I really want to commit to months and months and months of through hiking? And on that trail, I set up my tent in the rain. I had an injury that I had to walk through. And after that trail, I was like, I think I'm good. I think I've had enough through hiking for one lifetime. But then I was like, well, might as well do the JMT. It's about the same length. And after that trail, people seemed to really enjoy the videos of it. And so this was when I was in Reno for a few weeks, Reno, Nevada, for like 6 or 4 weeks or something long like that. But someone commented, I think it was a video where I'm hiking up a hill and I'm just ate a whole bunch at a little resupply stop. And I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? And someone said, you're doing it for us people who can't. Like, we get to see this experience because of you. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's just so cool to know that something I'm doing could really be beneficial to someone, even though it seems like I'm not the most famous hiking YouTube person out there, but people are still enjoying my stuff, and that's so cool to think about. I can do something I really love, and people are getting something out of it. So that's when I was like, okay, maybe I will do the AT. If I can commit to doing 3 weeks of a really hard hike, 2 or 3 weeks, I should say, then why not? Why not go for it? After the JMT, which was 211 miles, I know the distance for the Appalachian Trail is 2,195 miles. And I said to myself, after the JMT, could I do that 9 more times? And then I thought, yeah, if I got a rest and a good meal, a lot of good meals really, then yeah, I think I could. And especially if I had people with me the whole time, a group, a tramily, that meets along the way, then, that would, I don't think it's really outside of the realm of possibilities. I think I can do it.
I love the can-do attitude. And Doc from the John freaking Muir podcast, who I recently got a chance to interview, and he told me, he's like, Eric, it's really simple. You just wake up every day, you walk until the end of the day, and you stop, and you do it all again tomorrow. So I feel like you very much also maybe embody that attitude and that spirit, which is a really cool, real positive attitude. Something that I wanted to ask you about is that, and you've kind of alluded to it several times here, is that your subscribers, your fans, your viewers seem really supportive, and it seems like you're really building a nice, maybe like holistic community. Do you find that you get a lot of support from them?
Definitely. Yeah. For most of my life, I guess not most of my life, because social media didn't exist for like my childhood and teenage years, but in my 20s and stuff, I would think social media is all like people being fake and it's just not real. But during the pandemic, I already had a Beer and Beautiful Places Instagram account, and I met a lot of people through there, and it was so cool connecting with people all over the world or, wherever. And I was like, wow, you can do social media and build a genuine connection with people, and instead of being like, I am the creator, you are the audience, it's just more of a dynamic. You can make it more of a dynamic where it's like two people talking about things they have in common.
It's really cool to see, and it's definitely really fun to see in your videos is that like you get a lot out of them, and you kind of like reference your comments and all that. So it's a really cool experience. So now, when do you have a date for when the AT starts? When it'll start rolling out?
I sure do. The videos will start in mid-April.
Not too far off. Awesome. Well, I cannot wait to see your AT journey. Do you have? I'm trying to transition better to a closing, so I wanted to ask you. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Not really. I always tell people, do what you can while you can. If there's something you want to do, like van life, but you don't have the money to live in a Sprinter, what vehicle can you afford? If you want to do a through hike, but you don't have the time, is there a shorter trail that you can do? So just make it happen with what you can. And if it's not the experience you hope for, maybe this will give you insight to make that experience happen.
Great words. I love it. Just go out there and make it happen, and kind of be prepared to roll with it, it sounds like. Maddie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Beer and Beautiful Places on virtually all social media accounts, YouTube, Instagram, linked below. Thanks again for coming on, and I look forward to watching your AT trip.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.